Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Northeastern Regional Advisory Council meeting for the Division of Wildlife Resources for April 15th, 2021. My name is Brett Prevedel. I'm the current chair of the RAC, and I'm going to read a brief statement and then we'll proceed with our agenda. Due to the continued presence of COVID-19 in Utah and associated public health and safety risks, large public gatherings are still strongly discouraged by the CDC and many local health departments. Based on these risks and recommendations, the Division of Wildlife Resources and the chair of this public body have determined that the Regional Advisory Council and Wildlife Board meetings will continue in a purely electronic format for the time being. Anyone wishing to comment on the agenda topics in future meetings or to observe the meeting may do so by logging on to the division's webpage, where instructions and links are provided. Thank you. As I mentioned, I'm Brett Prevedel, and I would like to take a moment and introduce have the RAC members that are present introduce themselves. And then I will also do the same for the Wildlife Board. And we also have several Division of Wildlife representatives on the call, and I'd like to thank them for being here. So RAC members, go ahead and just jump in and introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, good evening. This is Dan Abeda with the Forest Service.
Jeff Taniguchi representing the Sportsman.
Brad Horricks, Una County Commissioner, representing the elected officials, I think.
Mike Smith, I represent the non-consumptive wildlife users.
I'm Daniel Davis, represent the Sportsman.
Natasha Haddon, representing the Bureau of Land Management.
I am Conroy Reed, and I representing the Union tribe.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for attending, RAC members, and welcome, Conroy. Do we have anyone from the Wildlife Board with us tonight? I'd like to recognize them. Okay, we will move on. The first action item on the agenda is to approve the agenda. Has everyone had a chance to look at the agenda? And if so, I would take a motion to approve the agenda.
Brad Horricks, I'd make the motion to approve the agenda.
Jeff Taniguchi, second.
Thank you. And as it has been on these online format, I will need to do a roll call. Dan?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Daniel?
Yes.
Natasha?
Yes.
Conroy?
Yes.
Thank you. The minutes from our last meeting, they were routed by Miles to everyone, and I think you've all had a chance to look at them. Were there any suggestions or any edits that anyone had? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our January meeting.
This is Dan. Yeah, I would make a motion that we approve the minutes from the January meeting.
This is Natasha. I will second that motion.
Okay. Dan?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Daniel?
Yes.
Natasha,
Yes.
and Conroy.
Yes.
Thank you. I will give a brief update on the last Wildlife Board meeting. The Wildlife Board meeting was on January 5th, 2021. And it was fairly short meeting. The action items were the landowner association permit recommendations. If you remember, we had adjusted some numbers based on what we felt as a RAC at least for the 3 landowner associations that are in the Northeast region. The Wildlife Board chose to approve the actual permit number recommendations presented by the division prior to our adjustments. And a little later, we'll talk about where that's heading. But for this year, and that was a 1 year, I believe that was just a 1 year number, even though it's a cycle typically. And then there's been a committee formed. I'll just talk about it right now. There's been a committee formed to look into how to do that consistently and fair across the board. There's a lot of different situations. So right now they went with the DWR recommendation. Then the Black Bear rule amendments, which were basically to get the division's rules in line with the legislation that went through the Utah legislature, was accepted as presented. And I believe that's all the action items that were on that Wildlife Board meeting. Are there any questions on any of that? Okay, if not, I will turn it over to Miles Hanberg, the Regional Supervisor, to give a regional update.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a few things to update the RAC on tonight. So in our wildlife section, they just completed bear denning events for this. They're monitoring for this year. They visited 8 bear dens this winter. These were dens that have a sow that's been GPS collared. So last year, some of those sows had newborn cubs, and as we returned this year, we found that none of those bear dens had any yearlings with them. So with the extreme drought that we've had this last year, likely those cubs were succumbed or kicked off, and certainly not with the females anymore. There were some dens with newborn cubs, so that's a good sign. But anyhow, not a good year last year for bears. Sage-grouse lek counts are underway. I think we're probably right in the peak of the lekking season right now. But along with that, we're collaring some sage-grouse with GPS collars on Diamond Mountain right now. There's been some previous collaring efforts up there, but with these GPS collars, we'll get a lot more fine-scale data with them. So that's going on right now as far as trapping those female sage-grouse, and hopefully to have that wrapped up in the next couple weeks. Right now is the time where we start to oftentimes lose a number of our fawn deer as deer start to make the transition from winter forage to the spring green up. That's when a lot of the mortality is triggered on fawns. And so, it hasn't been a real tough winter on fawns in terms of winter conditions, but a lot of our fawns came into the winter at a lower birth rate or lower body weight than they have in the past. And like I think we've talked a little bit before, the lower the body weight of those fawns, the less chance they have to survive. So we have seen some higher mortality rates on fawns than we would have expected given the winter conditions. But again, it's that body condition that's led to a lot of those mortalities. So a couple weeks ago, there was a wildlife board work session that spent most of the day discussing mule deer management and the status of mule deer in the state. There were some regional presentations as well. I know Dax Mangus had forwarded around that the link to that meeting to the RAC members. So if you have any specific questions, that was a really good informational meeting to really research and see what's going on with deer in Utah, and you can certainly pass that along to anybody that might have questions as well. In our habitat section, they're busy implementing a couple of projects before our end of our fiscal year. One of those is a lock and scatter project over in Rabbit Gulch, in Duchesne County. It's removing 767 acres of encroaching pinyon juniper. A lot of that's in old treatment areas that have previously been treated for big game habitat. So that's going on right now. And they're also wrapping up 9 additional guzzlers in the Book Cliffs in the McCook Ridge area to help increase in water distribution out there and more water for wildlife. So that's going well. In addition, there's starting a watershed assessment for the Strawberry River drainage within that Dollar Ridge burn scar. This watershed assessment will help identify the projects and the activities that will need to be done in the future to fully restore that watershed and put some stability back into that to help with wildlife habitat, but importantly, the Strawberry River and the blue ribbon fishery that is. Aquatic section, they've been pretty busy ramping up into the field season right now. Just finished this week spawning walleye over at Starvation. We're using that Starvation for a brood source for walleye stocked in the Northeast region waters. Basically, they spawn a little bit later than they do from Willard Bay, and the problem is when we stock larval fish into Northeast region waters, they're often still a little bit cold compared to what Willard Bay was. So this later spawning effort will more match the conditions that we have out here. So that's actually went really well, and hopefully those fish will be treated to make them triploid walleyes, and they will be stocked into Red Fleet Reservoir. Pelican Lake, there's a number of activities that'll be continuing down there this year. They're looking at putting some artificial reefs in a couple of places to help with the erosion from wind events when the lake is low. That increases turbidity tremendously in Pelican Lake. So hopefully these structures will help. I think those are planned for the fall. But in addition, we actually transplanted a number of tiger muskies in the 20-inch range into Pelican Lake this spring to help us with common carp and black bullhead control. Some of those species, as the fishery has been restored, they've kind of come along at the same rate as bass and bluegill, and these tiger muskies will hopefully help us get those kind of knocked back. And of course, tiger muskies are sterile, so as they start to go out of the picture, bass and bluegill will be there to be able to help control those larval fish from carp or bullhead in the future. So that's some good work going there. In law enforcement, the AIS decontamination station below Steinecker Reservoir is ready to go. We'll be operating that this year. That'll interdict boats that are heading not only to Red Fleet and Steinecker Reservoir, but also Flaming Gorge. So it'll be a good central location to inspect boats and decontaminate them for AIS as they head north, and we can do that in a consolidated area. We reported before at our last meeting that Sean Davis was retiring. He was our regional investigator. He's actually been replaced by Eric Miller. He was our Roosevelt district CO, so he's now our regional investigator. Law enforcement worked a number of illegal trapping cases throughout the winter. I think with people needing things to do like it's been all year, we still had a lot of people trapping despite lower.
Thanks, Miles.
Up in Red
Anyone
Creek.
have any questions? Miles, on the bear cubs, were there new cubs in the dens?
Can you hear me, Brett?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Just one last thing, the mountain goat viewing event up in Rock Creek went really well. That was held about a week ago, and we had nearly 200 participants that showed up to Rock Creek to look at mountain goats. So that went really well this year as well. So that's some updates I have for this RAC meeting, and I'll turn the time back over to you, Brett.
Sorry, I interrupted you. I had a little sound issue, I guess. On the bear cubs, my question was, were there young cubs with the bears? You mentioned the yearlings were missing.
Yeah, it sounded like some of those bears that would have weaned yearlings last year, some of those actually did have cubs this year. So, but just the cubs from last year didn't survive to become yearlings this year.
Okay, thank you. So, other questions from the audience for Miles? Okay, I see Joe Arnold has joined us. Would you introduce yourself, Joe, please? You may have a sound issue. Joe is a RAC member representing the public at large. And I would like to recognize Randy Dirth and Donnie Hunter from the Wildlife Board who have joined us. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, sorry about that, Brett. Yes, Joe Arnold, representing the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And there are no other questions for Miles. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the buck deer permit recommendations. Covy Jones is with us tonight. Would you be willing to just give us a very brief summary, Covy, as we go into this topic?
I think Miles will do that, Mr. Chair, if that's okay.
You bet.
Sure. So I can kind of give you an introduction in terms of what the public feedback was. The public feedback, there was 18% of the public that strongly agreed with the division's recommendation, 54.5% somewhat agreed, 9% neither agreed or disagreed, 9% strongly disagreed, and 9% somewhat disagreed. So in general, most people, the majority of people agreed with the recommendations that the division brought forward. So I could kind of summarize some of those comments that came in from the public, and we didn't have a ton of them in the region that came in, but some of the themes were people did agree with our recommendations. They actually agreed with some of the tag cuts, but there were other comments that actually felt like there should be more severe tag cuts as well. Another specific comment is they felt like non-residents permits should be cut in half before residents were cut. And then the final comment was that reducing buck permit numbers wouldn't necessarily make the herd grow. So those were comments that specifically related to this RAC and this RAC meeting and the agenda that we're talking about. There were additional comments that were probably more applicable to our fall meeting when we actually set season dates and hunt structures. And some of those comments ranged from cutting the season date length, changing some of the dedicated hunter program requirements, as well as changing some buck-doe ratios for certain units and expanding hunt units from the smaller units we're managing now back to more of a larger regional management strategy. And then finally, there was one comment about implementing a point restriction rule. So those are things they're comments that came in, but they really don't apply to this meeting. It'd be more applicable for our fall meeting. So that's kind of a summary of what the public comment was. And yeah, if there's any questions on the public comment, I can try to address those.
Thank you. In your RAC packet, there's a chart, and I guess we can just go through the buck recommendations first, and then the antlerless, and we don't need to go through each unit, but in general, the buck general season buck tags were reduced on the Uintas and South Slope, Yellowstone, South Slope, Vernal slightly, and the permit recommendations on the west side of the Uinta Basin are consistent with prior years. Does anyone have any specific items they want to address on the general buck season?
I do. When they do the recommendations for the buck permits, do they consider any part of the tribe when they get their permits?
Miles, who would you want to address that, or do you want to have sign that to somebody else?
Maybe I'll have Dax take a stab at that.
Hey, this is Dax Mangus. I'm the Regional Wildlife Program Manager. And help me out, Conroy, if I don't answer your question or if I misunderstood. You know, when we look at our deer populations and, you know, we model our populations, we look at, you know, the buck to doe ratios, fawn to doe ratios, all of that. You know, we do it for these entire management units that, and a lot of our management units include big blocks of tribal land where, so we get the population demographics looking at the entire unit. You know, we collect the data, the survival data. You know, I know Randall Thacker, who's a biologist on the South Slope, often coordinates with tribal members and works with tribal fish and game law enforcement to recover collars if we have a mortality. So that survival data, the ratio data that we collect is collected across the entire unit for both tribal lands and non-tribal lands. The hunting that occurs on tribal lands, you know, obviously that's managed by the tribe, but we have coordination meetings annually where we'll meet with like Jamie Areve, the tribe biologist, and talk about and share harvest data with each other. So all those things are taken into account. Obviously, the focus of most of what we're talking about in this meeting tonight are the public permits that are distributed through, you know, the state draw. And there are exterior boundary permits for the limited entry units that are issued by the tribe. But then as far as like general season hunting, you know, the tribe has their own regulations and stuff on that on tribal lands. And then I think any tribal member can hunt general season deer on exterior boundary lands as well. So, you know, all that data and all the land ownership is taken into account when we make the recommendations. So I don't know if that answered your question or not. If you have a follow-up for me, I'm happy to try to answer anything else.
No, I think you pretty much hit it. I just wanted to know if, as far as what they're working with the deer, I just wanted to make sure that, you know, everybody's, you know, I'm in line because I'm kind of new to this. So really, I'm just trying to get a handle on what kind of agenda is it as far as what the tribe is concerned.
Yeah, no, thank you. But yeah, we do coordinate on everything and are always happy to do that. And if you got more follow-up questions or, you know, anything like that, we're happy to figure that out and make it work. I know talking to Miles the other day, I think we have a meeting coming up here in a couple of weeks where, and, you know, regularly communicate and coordinate and share data and stuff. So thanks.
As a statewide summary, 2019, there was approximately 90,000 general buck deer tags. 2020, it took a significant reduction down to about 80,000. And this year, the recommendation is to go down another 5,000 approximately to just under 75,000. So with these drought cycles, the recommendations have been going down with it, and we're down considerably, about 20%, if I do the math right in my head, of where we were when times were a little better 3 or 4 years ago. Has anyone got any other questions or want to address any specific units? General Buck.
On the Manti unit, how did their RAC vote? What they vote on the Manti unit for the general population?
I can answer that, Brad. So there was a request to reduce 600 permits on the Manti, and that request went to all of the RACs, I believe. They took action on that in the southern and in the southeastern regions. In the central region, they chose not to take action. They listened to the request and chose not to take action. In the northern, they listened to the request and made a motion that failed to get a second to take action on that. In the southern, they took action and went with the recommendation to reduce the Manti permits by 600, which is from 8,100 to 7,500. And in the southeastern, they did as well. I guess a little background on that. The recommendation on the Manti is to stay status quo at 8,100, and the recommendation for 7,600, the fawn survival has actually been a little lower than we anticipated when we made our recommendation. It's still a good recommendation. Either recommendation would bring you inside the management plan. One is a little bit more conservative, and the other one, our recommendation is a little bit more generous, and the cut of 600 is a little bit more conservative. But neither recommendation is outside the management plan. And so if that's something the RAC chose to address, we would understand that.
I'd like to just make a comment. I was in the tractor, and the guy called me on my cell phone, and I can't remember his name and stuff, so he must have been pretty persistent to call people and asking for our support to, lower that 600 tags in the Manti. So I was just kind of curious. I didn't have pen or paper to write it down, his name and stuff like that, but I did keep that much in my mind, that boy, he talked a good story, and I've got to give him credit for, sounds like to me, he made the rounds, whoever he was.
Okay. Any other questions? And we can sure entertain that in a motion a little bit later if you want, Brad. Any other questions on any of the other units?
Mr. Chair, this is
Yes.
Dan Abeda.
Yes.
And I have more of a general question, kind of bigger picture question. So I don't know if this is the right time to ask that. Is it okay to ask that kind of a question?
Sure.
I think it's best directed towards Covy. Covy, I noticed that in your presentation that one of the slides showed a statewide deer population objective of just under 405,000 deer statewide. And it looks like for the most part, the data went back to 1992 to last year. So like 28 years worth of data there. And it looked like, for most part, it was the population estimate is right around 300,000 deer statewide. And so I'm just wondering, has the state ever considered, it seems like it's come up before, but has the state ever considered about, bringing that objective down to more of a number that is be closer to attain? I mean, like I say, it's been almost 3 decades that I based on the slide that was in your presentation, that it's been far from the objective. What are your thoughts on that question?
So Dan, when we rewrote the statewide deer plan in 2019, we went through the statewide deer population objective is just a summary of all the unit plans. And so when we rewrote that in 2019, we went through a lot of the objectives and made those exact recommendations. It actually was quite a bit higher before that. And we asked all the biologists and regional managers to take a really hard look at what was obtainable on their units under better conditions. You know, if we can get some better conditions, if we can get our habitat work done, what can we obtain? And a lot of these units, you know, that's pushing them just a little bit. And when you push all of them just a little bit, you end up with a goal that's pretty lofty and hard to obtain. And at the same time, I think it's appropriate. It's appropriate, and we're going to strive to make those gains. And the gains that we made from 2010 to 2015 and 16, it was incredible to see. We were on our way, and a lot of that is the habitat work that we've done, all of us all together in combination with the right climate, right? And so we just need, we're doing the work, we're putting in the work, and we just need the right climate. We're not ready to back away from that 400,000 number yet.
Okay. So just curious, Covy, what was, you say you redid the statewide deer management plan. What year again was that? 2017?
2019, we rewrote the plan. And Kent, do you remember what the objective was?
Yeah, I just have those numbers. I was going to give those to Dan. So we were at 453.1, and so we dropped that to the current, what is it, 404 and change, Covy?
Yeah, I can bring that up really quickly.
Yeah, I didn't.
Ken, did you say 453, Ken?
453,100, yes.
Okay.
So, and to clarify on the numbers, you're right. When you go back to the early 90s through about 2010, we were hovering 300,000, but then we had that growth. In 2015, we were up at about 385,000.
Okay. Yeah.
So we were starting to push 400, and we maintained that for a few years. Unfortunately, the droughts of 2018 through present aren't helping us one bit, and so we're in that downturn. But I think we are still confident that 400, 5,000 or roughly whatever it is appropriate.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, guys, for that answer. I appreciate that answer.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding the general buck recommendations? I'd like to roll into the antlerless deer and then the limited entry buck, and try to just do one motion at the end. And if there's certain things we need to break out, we can do that. The antlerless deer recommendations, as we just talked, the population, somewhere around a little over 300,000, and the recommendation is less than 1,000 antlerless permits. And as Covy mentioned in his presentation, most of them are targeted at either residential problem deer or agricultural problem deer. And then the one exception to that is probably the one here in our region where we have 200 tags recommended in that CWD hotspot around Mighton, Utah, and that is double of last year's permit numbers. So it's not a big number in the scope of overall, but it is a recommended doubling of them tags. Is that accurate? The way I portrayed that, Covy?
Yeah, that's accurate. And if you wanted Dax or somebody to speak to the data that we got on that, or why that recommendation, I think that the biologists wait for this all year. They love to speak at these meetings. So I'd hate to take away an opportunity from them.
Do we have results from last fall on the CWD testing in that area? Randall or Dax or whoever, would you address that?
I'll take that one, Brett. This is Randall Thacker. I'm the biologist for the South Slope, and a majority of that hunt is in the South Slope. Part of it's on the Anthro, though, too. But yeah, we did get the CWD data back so far as we had about 10 positives just this last year in that area, and so CWD positives in that area, and so it increased our concern even more. I guess we're worried about that little hot spot area down there, Pleasant Valley, that Bridgeland and Arcadia area right there, and Mighton area surrounding Mighton. got a real concern about the level of CWD that is occurring there. The majority of the positives are still in bucks, which is a more common thing with CWD, but we want to reduce the deer density down there. We've got a lot of agricultural deer down there that are just at high numbers, high density of deer. The antlerless animals don't get harvested hardly at all if we don't have a hunt like this. And so we're trying to reduce the deer density down there, the number of deer in those areas, and see if we can, reduce the likelihood that those positive animals are going to spread that to the surrounding area and have it go elsewhere in the unit. And so that's really the intention of that hunt.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Randall while we've got him on the spot? Are there any other comments or questions regarding deer antlerless recommendations? Okay, if not, we will move forward into the limited entry buck deer permits. Has everyone had a chance to look at them? The book Cliffs, I guess, is the one that usually comes up in our meeting here, which is our biggest limited entry buck tag, and the recommendation is a significant reduction overall from 375 in 2020 to 264 this year, so nearly a third. South Slope Diamond Mountain is recommended to stay stable. And I don't believe there's any other, there's some late season muzzleloader hunts, but do you have any questions on that, or anyone want to address the Diamond Mountain recommendation? Okay. Any other questions on limited entry buck recommendations? Pretty quiet bunch tonight. Okay, I would entertain any motion that, has anyone got any items they want to make a motion that we adjust on general deer, antlerless deer, or limited entry?
This is Brad Horricks. Quite impressed with that guy that spent the time to chase my phone number down, and I would like to see us to go with his recommendation. He seemed to be pretty passionate about that on the Manti, about cutting the 600 tags. I just seemed like he'd done his homework on it. Everything else looks real good to me. I have no problem with anything else. And I guess I'm just, felt like the guy had a good approach and knowledgeable about that. So I'd like to see us make the motion that would accept everything else and go ahead and go with the 600 tag reduction on the Manti.
So that would be the Central Mountains, Manti, San Rafael. The recommendation's 8,100, and your motion is to reduce that to 7,500. Correct, Brad?
Yes.
Okay. Any other individual items that anyone wants to address?
Brett, this is Richie. I'm sorry I'm late getting on. I've just got a question on the Manti. What's the range trend showing, and what's the body condition of their deer down there right now?
Range trend on the Manti, it really depends on where you are. Gordon Creek has struggled for a long time. The truth is the Manti's been more buffered from, it's still been in drought, right? I don't want to say it hasn't been in drought, but that central portion of the state between the Manti, the Nebo, and the Wasatch have all been buffered a bit. So it's not as bad as some of the other areas, right? It's not as bad as the Book Cliffs. That said, fawn survival is down this year. Fawn doe ratios were good, but fawn survival's lower than we anticipated for sure. Body condition, Kent, you want to speak on body condition on the manti?
Yeah, so including the central and the southeastern portions, we were running 0.97%, so right there at 9, which is on the lower end. In 2019, it was 11%, so we're down a couple percent, which will have an impact, but it's lowest in the state. We were down in the 5s, so not as bad as it could be, not great.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there's no other specific recommendations, we have a motion from Brad to reduce the recommendation on or to recommend 7,500 tags on the Central Mountains, Manti, San Rafael for general buck deer. Do we have a second?
I'll second that. This is Richie. I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I guess we'll deal with this one and then we'll do the rest of the packet as presented since I've got it this far. We're voting on reducing the manti tags right now. Dan?
Yes.
Jeff?
Aye.
Pardon me? Could you?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Brad?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Daniel?
Yes.
Natasha? We'll come back to Natasha. Conroy?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
And Richie?
Yes.
Natasha, are you?
Sorry. Yes, sorry.
Okay. No problem. So that passes unanimously on the manti motion. Now I would entertain a motion to accept the remainder of the deer recommendations, general buck, limited entry buck, and antlerless by the division.
This is Natasha. I make a motion to accept the rest of the packet as presented by the Division of Wildlife.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
This is Dan.
Jeff
I second
Tannegut.
that.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Dan
this is-
Abeda?
Yeah, Dan Abeda, and I second Natasha's motion.
Okay. Roll call. Dan?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Daniel?
Yes.
Natasha?
Yes.
Conroy?
Now, what are we actually trying to do here? We're just for the deer buck. Is that what we're doing, and everything else that comes to it?
This was the remainder of the deer recommendations, the general deer, general buck, limited entry buck, and antlerless recommendations. So all of the remaining deer.
I abstain from it.
Okay. Joe?
Yes.
Richie?
Yes.
Okay. Motion
And Brett,
passes.
this is Rebecca. I'm also on the meeting and I say yes.
Oh, hi, Rebecca. I'm sorry. Why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself, and then right after she's done, Richie, would you do the same?
I'm Rebecca Jones and I represent non-consumptive users.
Richie Anderson, represent agriculture.
Thank you. Rebecca, were you here for the last two votes?
Just that last one. And yes, on the 600 on the manti, the reduction.
The manti and then the general packet. Are you a yes on both of them?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the bull elk and buck pronghorn recommendations. Covy, would you mind taking just a brief moment and just kind of summarize them 4 points that you're recommending, just the general, the big picture?
Absolutely. Let me bring this up really quick for myself. All right, so in elk general season, the board added a few permits to the general season any bull hunt. So general season any bull, and those are set in the plan. And the board added, they went to 1750. Other adjustments, overall limited entry permits increased about 41 permits. The majority of that, though, came from the new handgun, archery, muzzleloader, shotgun permits and the September archery. And we had an additional 158 of those from some units that we converted through the process in the fall. So there was an overall decrease in the traditional limited entry units. And some of those decreases, I think, that affect the region that should be noted is a decrease in the roadless. There was a pretty strong sentiment that the roadless area, when we evaluated this as a committee and as an agency, and took the recommendation through to reduce the age objective in the Little Creek roadless area, it was met with some opposition, and the board and recommended to leave that age objective alone. And in order to manage to that age objective, we're recommending a significant decrease, also in a decrease on the rest of the book cliffs to meet the age objective. So that's overall in elk. In pronghorn, we're managing that, and we have for the last several years to an age objective now. And in most areas for pronghorn, what that's meant is a little more opportunity for pronghorn. Individual units have gone up and down, but overall, a little more opportunity in buck pronghorn for the public and hunters.
Thank you. It's kind of my perception that the pronghorn are doing pretty well through this drought cycle. Is that true?
There have been some areas where they've been more impacted than others, Brett. So some areas they've done well. Pronghorn can be really, really impacted by drought, and so it's actually been kind of surprising that they've weathered it as well as they have in some areas.
And then, if I may add, the youth tags will not count towards the general any bull, not youth tags, but youth that buy a general season bull tag will not count against the 17,500. So,
yeah, that's a good catch, Brett. Thank you for adding that.
Miles, would you take a moment to talk about the public comments on this topic?
Yes. So regarding the bull elk and pronghorn permit recommendations, 12.5% of the public strongly agreed, 12.5% somewhat agreed, 12.5% neither agreed nor disagreed, 50% somewhat disagreed, and 12.5% strongly disagreed. So as I reviewed those comments, some of the themes didn't necessarily completely relate to this recommendation cycle, but in general, they were general season concerns. There were 3 comments that wanted to see actually a reduction in general season bull elk permits, and a couple of them wanted to limit the archery tags, which are of course now unlimited. So there's a couple of comments along those lines. One other comment regarding elk was the antlerless control hunt on the South Slope Vernal. I think we'll probably talk about that more in a couple of topics when we get to antlerless, but that was included in the bull elk comment section. And another comment that also talked about getting rid of the multi-season elk tag. So again, those are kind of not applicable to this recommendation cycle, but that's the comment that we did receive. So anyhow, not a lot of feedback from the public on this one, but yeah, there were a couple passionate people about cutting general season elk tags.
Thank you. Does anyone want to start on any specific unit or have anything they want to discuss with the biologists in the region?
Yeah, this is Brad Horricks. On the roadless area down there, what's going on down there? Is it habitat or what's going on? We, had a history of giving quite a few tags away. Now it's plumb down to 6. What's happening?
Clint, are you with us tonight?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you good. Go ahead.
Perfect. So, Brad, the main issue there is just trying to manage to an age objective. And we haven't been able to meet that objective. The last 3 years, we've averaged 7-year-old bulls in there, and we're managing. Our objective is much higher than that, 7.5 to 8. And so we're just trying to find where we can find a way to increase the overall age of those bulls in that roadless area. We did recommend this last fall that we lower the age in the roadless to match the Bitter Creek side, the roaded area, and that didn't go through. And so to maintain that higher age objective, we gotta cut permits.
Yeah, but it kind of looks like we went from like 18, it goes back there to, let's see, 20 down to 6, and I don't have the previous on past that, but it's, man, it seems like a drastic reduction. Did we really over harvest the big bulls last year, or has it been going on for 3 or 4 years, or what, there's been a cycle of gradually the age limit just going down over the last 4 or 5 years?
Brad, this is Dax. I might just speak to this a little bit. Just the trend there, we've been cutting permits for 5, 6, 7 years. And as we cut permits, the age is not going up. And like Clint mentioned, we've got a lot of, it's really the same elk population. The roadless can feel really big if you're in there on foot or even on horseback. But for an elk, it's just a matter of a few hours. They can be on tribal land in the roadless area and off the roadless. Those elk move a lot, especially those bulls during the rut and stuff when we're doing a lot of the hunting. So the elk move quite a bit. It's really one elk population. It's really hard to manage it for a separate age in there. So, even though we've cut permits over the last, multiple years, the age has not gone up. So, like Clint said, we recommended changing the age objective in the roadless to have it match the rest of the book cliffs. And the answer we got through the public process was no, find a way to manage for quality bulls in the roadless area, even though it's the same population. So instead of trying more of the same and making a gradual cut and seeing if the age changed, that obviously hasn't worked the last 5, 6, 7 years. So we made a pretty aggressive cut, a quite aggressive cut. And we'll see if that can work. If by, really reducing those permits, we can grow some older bulls. Our hunters can be super selective. The handful of folks that are able to draw a tag can be super selective, and should be a really great hunt if you're one of the individuals that's lucky enough to draw a permit in there. But, just we're not getting the results that we've been charged to get with gradual cuts. So we're making an aggressive one to try to get there.
All right, thank you. That makes sense, I guess. Thank you.
There was also an action last fall by the Wildlife Board to reduce the rifle spike hunt in the book cliffs to 5 days on the season. And I know that's not going to have any type of an immediate impact on this issue, but there was a reduction. Well, I don't know what that'll do to harvest, but there was a reduction in the season.
This is Richie. I'd like to just make a comment on the roadless area. And I attended the Landowner Association meeting at request of the landowners a few weeks ago with Dax there. One issue in the roadless is some of the water resources up on top of the ridges are really depleted. Those was established by ranchers years and years ago. where that's typically not grazed or grazing's typically not allowed, there hasn't been ranchers in there maintaining those facilities, the stock ponds and such. But in talking to Dax, I didn't know what the availability to improve those water sources were. A lot of that ground is owned by Sitla. I really think if we could get in there, if the DWR or Sitla could work together and get some of those water resources on those ridges operating and open back up, primarily on these dry years. A lot of times there is no water on those ridges anymore. Those stock tanks and stuff are not holding water. If we could get in there and improve those and get them functional again, I think that would help not only draw elk back into the roadless a little bit, because there's a lot of habitat projects going on outside the roadless. I think we need to up the habitat projects in the roadless, primarily on top of those ridges, get some better distribution and maybe pull some of those elk back in there. That's just my thought. I think it's a possibility, and Dax indicated that people could probably go in there and improve those water features again and help that area. Thank you.
Thanks, Richie. Also in the Book Cliffs on the roaded area, the Bitter Creek South, the recommendation is to go from 125 last year to 100 tags this year. South Slope Diamond Mountain, there's a recommended increase of about 10% and from 56 to 61. And then I believe the other unit in our region is the North Slope Three Corners, where there's a slight reduction recommended from 28 down to 25. Are there any other questions or comments on the limited entry bull elk?
Yeah, this is Dan Abeda. I just want to say I fully support the move in the Book Cliffs, not only for the bull elk, but also for the buck deer. And I think this is something that I know it's hard to do, but like I say, I just fully support. Those are, pretty significant reductions in tags, and I hope that, my hope would be that, if we don't see the age increase, harvest age increase in a year or two, we stick with those reductions and not raise the tag. I just like I said, I just want to go on record and say I commend those reductions in the Book Cliffs for bull elk and deer.
I like the idea too that this is Brad, the trying the 5-day spike hunt there in the Book Cliffs. I think it shows the public that we're trying some things and working forward on that. So that'd be interesting to see next year at this time what we feel like that the harvest, what that did to the harvest.
Yeah, this is Joe. That's one of my questions as well, is if we're reducing the limited entry, what are we doing about the spike tags? Is that an unlimited number? But reducing it to 5 days? Is that correct on the Book Cliffs?
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure exactly. I'll answer that, Joe. It's never really unlimited because there's a cap statewide. So it's the proportion of hunters, I guess, that have hunted there with a reduced number of days. Yeah, and really, there's several issues going on in the Book Cliffs. You say what we're doing in the Book Cliffs. I mean, we just dumped resources into one of the largest neonate studies we've ever done as an agency in the Book Cliffs over the last 3 years, and what we're learning is that under current conditions, we're nutritionally limited. And so the spike hunt is probably the last thing we want to eliminate in the Book Cliffs if we care about big bulls. If we want to have big bulls and maintain big bulls out there, it just doesn't make any sense to pack more males than you need. We're already bull heavy, male heavy on most of our units, which is by design. Our limited entry units have a lot of bulls, and we want that. And the problems that we're running into the Book Cliffs our nutritional limitations, which we're working hard to address. We just need the climate to help out as well. And we'll continue working on it. I know, Brett, you're part of that working group, right? A lot of folks on here are, and we're doing a lot of things in the booklets.
Yes, and Richie, the water developments are a big part of that that process. And SITLA is very active, so I'm not exactly sure if the ones you mentioned are on the list, but we can look at that, because it's one of the major topics in that group is to not only provide water for the wildlife, but to disperse the livestock. I forgot one other former limited entry area that I'll bring up, the 9 Mile Anthro. If you remember, the Wildlife Board switched the hunt strategy to a hams hunt, handgun archery muzzleloader, primitive muzzleloader, and that's a new hunt, and this is 40. There's 20 archery tags and 20, I guess muzzleloader and shotgun, or I guess they can probably hunt archery for all on that other tag too. So there's 40. That was the number that is being recommended, is 40 tags total on the Anthro unit. All right. Any other questions on bull elk? Conroy?
Yes, this is Conroy. And I was asking about the nutritional plan as far as the book list. Are you contacting the tribe to see if they can actually help out with some of that stuff, or is it something that you have actually considered because some tribal land is down there? Is it something that you could actually think about, maybe, so you wouldn't have to bear the burden of that, because there is tribal land down there. So, it would probably make some sense to try to include the tribe in some of that nutritional water, them trying to assist you with that.
And the tribe is represented on the Book Cliffs working group, and I know they've been very active on the feral horse issue, which is a major factor in the forage balance on the Book Cliffs. So we've had very good support from the tribe.
Okay, I just wanted to see, just so like I said, I'm new here and I'm trying to get all the information that I can from this. But I mean, sure, for the most part, the tribe is willing to help as long as there's good communication in between the state and the tribe and any other entities that are involved in this.
Thank you. And we know, all the species move back and forth between the jurisdictions out there, and the tribe's been very, very active in these initiatives up to this point.
Mr. Chair, if I maybe just for a minute, we actually do have kind of a summary report of a lot of the activities that have gone on in the booklet working group. If it's acceptable to this RAC, we could probably present an update at one of the next couple of RAC meetings, just to give the RAC members here a little bit of a better idea of everything that's been done. A lot of pond cleaning and guzzlers in the road and roadless. There's been quite a few things done, and we need to do more and keep going. So, but there's been some good progress made. So it's something we've got to continue to work on. So if that's something the RAC would like, we can certainly give an updated presentation here next couple of meetings.
Miles, I'd like to have that, just because, well, if you don't toot your own horn and what's going on, we don't know about it, or, some of us don't know about it. So I think it's good as we go along a little bit, any updates and what's going on. I would like to hear Miles just, more educated about it, and it helps us give answers to the public and stuff too, Miles, but in the future.
So let's plan on the next RAC meeting, probably during the regional supervisor update. Just kind of the end of that, we'll give a little more detailed update on what activities have gone on in the Book Cliff working group, and kind of an overview. So we'll plan on that.
Thank you, Miles. Are there any other questions related to bull elk recommendations?
Yes, this is Daniel Davis. I have some questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, Covy, could you share with us the impregnation rate on the cows this year in the Book Cliffs during the collar study?
Yeah, Daniel, do you care if I go back to the last 3 years? Is that okay?
Absolutely, be great.
Yeah, so we were in 3 years ago when we sampled the Book Cliffs. It was highly concerning, and it was just above 50%, like 53% of the cows were pregnant that year. We went back out, and that was a really dry year. Came off a drought. We come back out off a really wet year, and we are back up, I believe, at about 86%. Which is something we see consistently across the state. That's a good pregnancy rate for cow elk. We came back off that wet year and into a dry year again, and dropped back down into the 50, just above 50% range. And one of the interesting things was that none of the cows that packed a calf this year, or packed a calf last year, and successfully had a calf, none of those cows were pregnant again this year. And it's really multiple problems. One, that population is just it's struggling because of the environmental conditions, and it's aging, right? So we also took teeth on the harvested animals from the Book Cliffs, and Dax should probably talk about this data a little more. I think it's an important part of this story. We dropped back down to 50 percentile, and I know the average age of cows harvested inside the roadless, the average age was 10, and the average age in the rest of the Book Cliffs also super high. We're 3 and 4 years above on average. Our cows are 3 and 4 years older on average than they are in any other units that we're harvesting cow elk across the state. So we're seeing a problem where it's one of the only populations in the state we've ever studied where we're bumping up against a carrying capacity with elk. Dax, this and Clint, I want to make sure I don't miss anything. Is there anything that you'd add to that may be important for Daniel? As he's asking about pregnancy rates, I think, and body condition there.
I think you hit a lot of it. I think just one of the main points, and this goes across all species in the Book Cliffs. It's not just elk. It's not just deer, and that Book Cliffs working group, Brett helped a lot there. We did a forage analysis and looked at especially the summer range in the Book Cliffs, which is a limiting factor. And, we basically determined that we don't have enough feed for all the animals that are there, both wild and domestic and feral or a stray or whatever else. We don't have enough feed for everything that's there unless we have just like an absolutely perfect year, perfect conditions. And it's been a long time since we've had a perfect year with perfect conditions. And so stuff is struggling across the board, and all the different data, all the different metrics, everything we're collecting is backing up that, is validating that, verifying that. Poor body conditions, poor pregnancy rates, poor survival, poor recruitment of neonates into the population. It's just across the board. We are up against a resource limitation. We're hitting, a carrying capacity that has been diminished because of, bad weather patterns, drought conditions, and that type of thing. So, yeah, yep.
Thank you. So what time of the year are you guys actually ultrasounding the cows to determine pregnancy?
Ken, you want to talk about the timing of that?
It's the last week of February. And we had a sample this year. So we wanted to get 30 pregnant cows. That was our goal. It took us 58 animals caught to get that.
So I understand.
The other thing with our veterinarians out there as well. And so when they're not, it's obvious on the ultrasound at that time. But sometimes, even if we did think we missed it, we take blood from the animals. So we run the blood samples and confirm it. And then we also can do some palpation rectally.
So I know my question would be, I guess, is understanding animal nutrition and the fact that if their body conditions aren't the greatest, there's times that they won't conceive or carry full term on some pregnancy, but at that time, they're diminished a little bit. But statement was made that we have an abundance male population out there, but how do we? Is there areas in the Book Cliffs where the male population isn't present? Or, I mean, it's a pretty diverse area. Is it been considered that a higher bull to cow ratio is maybe more subjective? I know we don't manage to that, and it's a lot of age objective information, but the more some of these studies come about and the information comes about from the landowner perspective and comparative to how they're running the livestock in the area as well, it seems pretty consistent across the board that it takes a little bit higher bull to cow ratio.
Are you wondering if there's not enough bulls to impregnate all the cows? Is that what?
Well, that was a statement that was a statement that was made, and so I wanted to question that
Yeah.
because it was made that we have an abundance of males, but yet our pregnancy rates are so low.
So yeah, I think it's just that the youth or the cows aren't coming into estrus, and I think the reason I would definitely point to that is we have 3 years of data with essentially the same bull ages each year, and so we can assume the same bull to cow ratio each year as well. And we went from 50%, 86% to 50%, and so it doesn't appear that the number of bulls would have anything to do with it. Additionally, on units that are managed also with spike hunting and actually at a lower age on the Wasatch, our pregnancy rate was consistently in the upper 80s over 4 years of that study. And there was no data to support that. So it seems like it's more of a nutritional limitation, an age limitation, but I just don't see any data to support that they're not getting pregnant.
And Daniel, in addition to that, there is some research out there on bulls per 100 cows needed in elk. And it's been a while since I read this, but I was amazed at, in wild elk populations how low your bull cow ratios needed to be. It was lower than deer, how low they could be and still have the ability to fertilize all the cows. So I don't hold me to this, and I understand we're in a live public meeting, but if I remember correctly, the number I read was like two bulls per 100 cows was sufficient in the elk population they were studying, which is crazy low. So anyway.
Sure, and that's understandable, and it seems more consistent as long as being a part of these studies as well, and representing some of these organizations in these studies, that it seems to be the Book Cliffs seem to be a beast of their own. I mean, we can look at a lot of studies throughout the Western United States in different areas, but the consistencies that we see out there and some of the impacts we see don't seem to always line up. We've seen some of that over time. If everybody would recall, Sportsman come forward and we asked for permit reductions years ago. Due to drought, a lot of folks didn't feel it was necessary. We needed to take the mouths off the landscape, and now we're kind of behind the curveball, and now we're advocating to remove tags in large numbers when we, so it's a good move. It's finally happening, but it sucks to see that much at one time rather than a progressive trend.
Thank you.
I have one more question, Mr. Chair. Were you going to address the youth permits separate from the limited entry bulls?
The draw statewide youth hunt, is that
Yes, sir.
what you're referring to? I had missed that. The recommendation is to stay stable at 500 tags statewide, and I believe that's open to. Is that any bull area, or is that all the spike and any bull areas that they can hunt? Anyone know that?
Those are in the general season, any bull area.
Yes. Okay. So so the recommendation is to stay stable at 500 tags, Daniel. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the youth do not count against the 17.5 new cap on the general any bull tags. So there's some, I guess you could say there might be some extra youth tags available over the counter. What was your question on that, or do you want the DWR to address anything about that, Daniel?
Yeah. Yes, I do. I have a question about that. By rule, just like every limited entry, we have percentage ratios of what's allowed to the non-residents. Is it against, and I'm not going to throw any word out there because I don't want it to become legal or anything like that, but is it against any kind of program or policy if we were to add permits and make them resident only applicable permits? Does that go against rule? Does that have to go to the legislature to be changed? Could somebody answer that for me?
Yeah, I think I can answer it for you, Daniel. The answer is we've allocated that 10% to non-residents. At one time, it was a part of the Commerce Clause, I think, and I'm not an attorney. I can't go into that as far as having to offer non-resident opportunity. I believe that now I guess there's not that concern. It more comes into being a good neighbor, I guess. I've been asked this at several RACs, where are we at in terms of what we offer to non-residents? And we're not the highest, we're not the lowest. When I attend meetings with the Colorado commissioners, they sure let us, they've let me know how they feel before and said, hey, Utah, step it up. We give your hunters a lot of our permits and we expect you to be fair in return. And we've said, well, we feel pretty good about where we are. We're not the highest, we're not the lowest. We're about on average 10%, and we're comfortable with that. And we feel like we're playing nice. But no, I don't think there's any, if anybody on here, I don't know if our attorney is on here, Greg or Justin, if you want to answer on that, but I don't believe there's any legal implications for that.
And we'd be just making recommendations to the Wildlife Board anyway. So if it was an issue, if you had a recommendation, they could address it legally when it got to them. The current recommendation is 450 resident tags for the youth, any bull, and 50 non-resident for a total of 500.
Mr. Chair, may I weigh in on that real quick? This is Justin Shannon.
Yes.
I think where the draws already occurred, and we've had non-residents apply for these permits, we would need to have some type of permit available for the non-resident. So
yeah,
we can't have a draw with applicants and then not have a permit available for it. So
absolutely, Justin. That I was more seeking clarification if there was an addition of permits, if a portion of those had to be allocated, or an increase in permits, if there was any legality issue or rule that had to be followed to quantify a specific amount to the non-residents was all.
Okay.
Not take away.
Yeah, got it.
Sorry.
No, I think that's on me. I think I misunderstood. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I was a little vague, I'll be honest.
Good discussion. Any other topics related to bull elk? Okay, does anyone have a desire to deviate from the recommendations and make a motion?
I do, Mr. Chair. I'd like to address the youth bull elk tags. So there was a lot of discussion last fall, if I may give a little dialogue and as to why. There was a lot of discussion last fall when a lot of the restructuring was taking place and the new hunt structure for the archery season and extending that archery season hunt and realizing the amount of permits that the youth are awarded for that same time frame that's now opened up to the public at an unlimited rate. And out of fairness and equality, I feel it important to provide some more opportunity for those youth during that time frame as well. And I would like to make a motion on the youth limited entry bull elk hunt that permits be increased by 250 and those be made resident only youth.
From 450 to 700 resident tags. So is the motion, I believe.
With the 50 remaining as non-resident. That's correct.
Yes. Okay. All right. We have a motion to increase the youth limited entry tags, which is a draw tag for resident youth by 250 tags. Do I have a second? Okay, not hearing any. Are there any other motions regarding bull elk?
I'm sorry, I was trying to get on there. I'll second Daniel's motion. I think we need more opportunity for the youth. I'll second that motion.
That motion is seconded by Joe Arnold. And we will now vote on increasing the youth draw bull elk tags from the resident from 450 to 700. Dan?
No.
Jeff? You're still on mute.
No.
Okay. Brad?
No.
Mike?
No.
Somebody's got some music on. Mute yourself. Thank you. Daniel?
Yes.
Natasha?
No.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yep. No.
Okay. Conroy?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Richie?
No.
Rebecca?
No.
Motion fails 3, 4, 7 against. Thank you. Do we have any other specific motions regarding bull elk?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I would like to address the hams hunt on a 9 Mile anthro.
Okay. Go ahead.
Those permit numbers, just for quick clarification, were 40 for the September hunt and 40 for the October hunt. Is that correct?
I don't believe so. I believe it was 20 and 20 for a total of 40.
Yeah.
Would you clarify that? Someone from the division?
18 in archery and 18 and 2 for, sorry, this is Joe. Archery is 18 and 2 for a total of 20, and the hams hunt is 18 and 2 for a total of 20, and so a total of 40 altogether, it looks like to me.
That's correct.
Okay.
And-
Sorry, that's where 40 stood out so much. It was the combined. I apologize.
Okay.
Also on there, it shows nothing for 2020 permits. Could we understand what the 9 Mile anthro was last year, even though it was not, it was a limited entry, so there was no archery and hams. What were the permit numbers last year on the 9 Mile anthro?
Derek, do you have that? I believe it was it 38 or 36? I can look it up really quick if Derek doesn't have it.
We'll look it up really quick. I think Derek couldn't make it tonight, so we'll look it up really quick.
Sorry to jump in there, Daniel.
No, that's okay. I appreciate it.
While they're looking up that number, are there any other specific issues anyone wants to address that deviate from the recommendations for bull elk? Okay, we'll get that number and then we'll proceed.
Why that number's being brought up, the reason I want to address that, could somebody also share with us the success rates on those? I know those. I've looked them up myself to see what the previous hunt structure success rates were. Is that something in the meantime we can share as well, or is that more to come?
Yeah, Kent, will you get on success rates? Is that okay, please?
Yeah, I was looking up the other thing. It'll take a minute for these now.
So last year on 9 Mile Anthro, there were 9 archery tags. There were 8 early rifle tags. There were 8 late rifle tags, 5 muzzleloader tags, and 1 multi-season. So anybody add those up?
$31.
Yeah, 31.
Sounds right.
And I think it's important to, Daniel, I guess I'll just answer this. When we were asked to look at units that weren't working well as limited entry units, the division's recommendation on the 9 Mile Anthro was to go to general season. You know, when we looked at the fluctuation in age and just the difficulty of managing that unit, with the sentiment, the public sentiment was a little different, and it felt that it may fit better into this new structure of September archery and October, November handgun archery, shotgun muzzleloader. And the philosophy behind that was that it was to actually be able to provide more opportunity, understanding that it could be a difficult hunt, it could be tough. Obviously, you're restricted on weapon type, and you can probably draw a tag more frequently.
And for success rates, I'm showing 63% for rifle, 80% for muzzleloader, 11% for archery. That was 2020 successes.
Thank you, Kent. I appreciate you guys doing that. With that information, Mr. Chair, I would make a motion that we increase those permits by 5 for the September hunt and for the remainder hunt in October to a total of 50 overall.
Increase 5 and 5 for a 10 for a total of 50.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, we have a motion from Daniel to increase the tags on the Anthro 9 Mile hams hunt by 10 tags for a total of 50. Do we have a second?
Let me clarify. This is Joe. Was that 5 for archery and 5 for hams?
That's correct.
Yeah, this is Dan Abeta, and I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll take a vote. Dan?
Yes.
Jeff?
No.
Brad?
No.
Mike?
No.
Daniel?
Yes.
Natasha?
No.
Conroy?
No.
Joe?
No.
Could you repeat that, please, Joe?
No.
Thank you. Richie?
No.
Rebecca?
No.
Motion fails 2 to 8. Okay. Any other specific motions regarding bull elk? If there are none, I would entertain a motion for the remainder of the packet as presented, bull elk.
This is Natasha, and I'd like to make a motion to accept the remainder of the elk package as presented by the DWR.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
This is Brad, and I'd second that.
Dan?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Daniel?
No.
Natasha?
Yes.
Conroy?
Yes.
Joe?
No.
Richie?
Yes.
Rebecca?
Yes.
Okay, and motion passes 8-2. We'll move on to Elk Antlerless and the general recommendations statewide are fairly stable from 9,100 last year, about 9,200 to 8,800 this year. If anyone has any units they want to discuss, they're out of the area. I'll briefly go through our units. North Slope Summit is recommended to be reduced from 150 to 100, and West Daggett is recommended to stay stable at 40. North Slope Three Corners does not have cow tags. South Slope Yellowstone, the big change there is the recommendation is to eliminate the control tags, and with that increase the draw tags. So it looks like there is a significant increase in draw tags from 150 to 625, but at the same time the control tags were eliminated. And then there is private lands tags on that unit also. South Slope Diamond Mountain Bonanza Vernal, slightly down on antlerless permits from 750 to 630, and an increase in private lands tags from 450 to 650. Though I believe there was a smaller boundary on them private lands tags to exclude the Diamond Mountain portion.
Hey, Brett, can I just pipe in really quick on that one just to make sure we're all clear?
Please
so
do.
It's the 450 is how many of the private lands antlerless elk permits have been being issued for the vernal bonanza unit, those two subunits combined. And then we're recommending adding 200 more that will just be for Diamond Mountain. So there'll be a quota of 200 private lands only permits that would be valid on Diamond Mountain. And then that existing 450 that's been on the Bonanza Vernal would continue at the same level. So just to clarify.
Thank you for correcting me on that, because I was confused, obviously. The Book Cliffs, last year there was 150 tags. This year they're recommending 255. I don't believe the recommendation has changed. It was just reduced at the Wildlife Board based on a motion last year. So the recommendation is to increase tags, but I think it's consistent with last year's recommendation. And then 9 Mile Anthro, which is, I guess, central region anyway. I guess that's in our region. 500 last year, 500 again this year, and 200 private lands tags consistent. Wasatch Mountains of Vinnequin, they're recommending a 50 tag increase from 100 to 150. And I believe that takes care of all of them in our region, though you're welcome to look at the chart and ask questions of any others you have interest. Or is there any comments on this recommendation?
This is Dan Abeta. Yeah, I just want to get a little clarification here. The 600 control tags on the Yellowstone unit, they've been shifted to what, Dax? Is it private lands only, draw tags? What are they?
Randall's on. Well, let's let Randall address that. There wasn't a limit on the control tags, though, Dan.
Yeah, the control tags were unlimited essentially, but but that's for multiple units. I think there's 6 units, I believe, anyway, up to maybe 7, 6 anyway, at least last year that were in the state that had antlerless control permits. And so you could buy that permit and use it in any of those units. If you had already had a bull elk tag for that same unit or a buck deer tag, a tag for that unit, you could then harvest an antlerless, elk while you were there hunting your other hunt during your hunts and stuff. And so there have been quite a few of those. We've been up to 1,700 of them at times hunting, being utilized on the South Slope Yellowstone. Some years, of course, several hundred less than that. But the success rates on that aren't near as high either. The success rates are in the teens usually on that hunt. And so but there was a real concern on that one that we were having so much hunting pressure on the cow elk on the unit, even prior to the rifle hunt, that a lot of the animals, even more of the animals, were pushing down onto the tribal lands to the south and were being unavailable then to our general public. And there's much less hunting pressure on the tribal lands that time of year. And so by hitting them hard on the forest early like that, it was probably we think it was helping contribute to why so many of the elk leave before the rifle hunt. And so this is an attempt to back off on some of that pressure during the archery hunt and the muzzleloader deer hunt, where some of that was happening before, that was helping push the elk down even earlier onto the tribal lands. And they'd go down there eventually anyway for the winter, but we want to keep as many of those up on the forest as possible for opportunities there. And so what we've done is switch that. Recommendation is to put more. We'll still have some permits, limited entry cow tags during that rifle hunt, and then during the muzzleloader elk hunt, which is later, the last hunt really we have out there on general season hunts, and put some hunting pressure there later to still get that antlerless harvest we need. We still that unit's over objective, has been for years, but it's also it's been maintaining now for 5 or 6 years at about the steady level, and so we do need to get antlerless harvest, and so that's where we've shifted it, is to those limited entry hunts, hoping that in the past when we've had those hunts, they've had a little higher, double the success rate of like the antlerless control permits and things like that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thanks, Randall. I do have a follow-up question on the 200 private lands only cow elk tags for Diamond Mountain. Are those kind of a new thing, like over and above last year's quota, or is that a shift from something else?
I guess I'll ask that. Amy can jump. Amy, go ahead.
Yep, so this is Amy Vanderweer. I'm the biologist for Diamond. So in the past, we've been issuing depredation vouchers to the Landowner Association. So this is an attempt to streamline the process. So they're still getting the same amount of pressure on the private lands without having to go through all the steps of the depredation program.
So basically, these private lands only permits will take the place of those depredation permits that have been issued to the Landowner Association in the past. We'll still continue to have the proclamation draw antlerless elk permits like we've had in the past. The majority of the folks that draw those, or a lot of the folks that draw those, end up hunting them on public lands. I think most of our antlerless elk pressure on the private lands probably used to come from those private lands depredation permits, but instead we'll transition from those, and these private lands only permits will kind of take the place of those depredation permits.
Okay, so is it really, it sounds like it's more of just a administrative, making this easier administratively? Is that what I'm hearing?
It gives a little more flexibility to the landowners on Diamond Mountain to address You know, if certain landowners are really overwhelmed with antlerless elk on their individual properties, it gives them a little more flexibility, because in the past, the association would distribute those antlerless permits, and then some landowners would end up with a lot of elk on them and not enough permits, and other landowners would end up with, you know, not as many elk and extra permits. So I think it maybe just streamlines that process. So in a way, you could say it kind of helps with the administration. I think it doesn't just help the division, it probably helps Diamond Mountain landowners a little bit as well. I hope it does anyways.
This is
All right. Yeah.
right.
Thank you.
I'd never heard any, I'd heard nothing but positive and support of doing it this way from the Landowners Association. So I think it's a good deal. I spoke to a couple, three of them, and they were all in favor of it. So I think this is a good deal.
And I will add that the private lands tags all the way across the South Slope have been very successful. They're getting the numbers they want as far as bringing the herd, keeping the herd objective stable, and the success rate is significantly better than the control tags. And initially, I was one that had a lot of concern about the private lands tags, but as I watched it evolve, I think the division's done a really good job with these private lands tags of addressing depredation issues without in a fairly simple way.
I do have one follow-up question. So the private landowners on Diamond Mountain can set the fee for accessing that private land as they see fit, correct?
Yes, that's, yes, they can, just like they used to be able to sell the vouchers for what they wanted for trespass fees.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions regarding antlerless elk? Are there any motions regarding any deviations from the recommendations?
I have one more question, Mr. Chair.
Okay, go ahead.
So on the 9 mile anthro, consistently we have a harvest objective of 500 public and the 200 private land. Why such a high number on those cow permits?
Maybe I can answer this. Derek's not available tonight, but so the population objective, so the target, the goal population on the 9 mile anthro is 700 elk. We're consistently over that number. And so we issue quite a few antlerless permits to try to manage towards that objective. Success rate it varies year to year, but a lot of years it's fairly low. We did some collar study work on elk on anthro a few years back, and it was really interesting to see that the elk during summer months when access was good to the top, they spent a lot of time in the low elevations on tribal lands and in the thick like pinyon juniper woodlands. And then in the winter, as we got snow and it kind of started blocking off the roads and the access to the high elevations, a bunch of those elk moved. So they kind of did the opposite of what you'd think. They spent the summer in the desert and the winter on the top of the mountain, but it really had to do, I think, with avoiding people and going where the access wasn't. And so, you know, success rate on those anthro, especially those late cow hunts, isn't great. We've seen documented a lot of movement between the Avinaquin unit and the anthro unit. Those elk move back and forth. And so it's kind of tricky. That's why the timing on a lot of those hunts on anthro is later in the year, because we're managing for a wintering population objective. And we get a lot of animals that come in to the unit later in the year from anthro, but it depends sometimes on the year. Permit numbers on anthro have stayed about the same the last few years. Seems to be working okay. Success rate's a little low, but you know, it seems to be working. And that's kind of the basis behind that recommendation, is just to try to manage to objective and taking into account that we know we typically have fairly low success. So that's why we issue so many.
Thank you. Randall, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, just to make one more additional point on that, Daniel, if you'll notice, half of those permits, 250 of them, the late hunt is actually the west anthro of Vinnequin. That's both units. The Vinnequin subunit of the Wasatch is included in that hunt with it. Those really, it's just kind of a technicality that we put them all into the anthro with the anthro unit. You know, we could have just as easily put them all in the Vinnequin and said there was 250 more there, and that would make it look like there's only 250 on the anthro. It's just kind of how the naming, trying to be consistent with how we've kind of put those permits, but it actually, half of those tags can hunt the Vinnequin too, which is actually larger than the west anthro portion. So it's maybe not as much hunting pressure there as you would think. So, you know, just assuming they're all on anthro.
Miles, you mentioned earlier there was some comments specific to antlerless elk. Do you have that available? Or
there were just two comments, and the one comment was pretty close to what Daniel just brought up. They were just wondering and thinking that it was a lot of permits for anthro. And then the other comment was questioning the elk permits, the cow antlerless permits in the book cliffs. So that was the two, but no other feedback other than there was one comment, that did comment about the antlerless control permits, and I think their concern is that they had applied for, I think, for a deer tag or something on the Yellowstone unit in the application process, and then this process is coming after that, where the antlerless control would ultimately, if the board approves, the recommendation will actually be eliminated. So that was their concern.
Yes, that's accurate. I spoke to them. They were dedicated hunters that were taking advantage of being able to hunt elk during dedicated hunter deer seasons, and they've already put in for them tags, and they felt like the timing was not fair to them.
This Richie, hey, just for the book cliff cow elk tags, could you just clarify your reasoning behind that? I've had a few people kind of hit me up about that, and I'm okay with the recommendation, but could you just clarify why you recommended the antlerless tags you did in the book cliffs?
Clint, would you address that, please?
You bet. Like we've talked about already, the overall age of the elk in the book cliffs that we found out from this last seasons of harvest is higher than what we usually see, especially in the roadless. And if you look at our overall population and how many cow elk we're really harvesting on the unit, it's not going to drive the population into the ground. The idea behind it is to maybe jumpstart the population, maybe lower, kill some of these older cows that are competing directly with younger cows that have potential for production. And, you know, you can come back and say, well, you know, most hunters don't want to kill, you know, gummers out there on the landscape. You know, they're after, you know, some nice plump, you know, yearling 2-year-old cow. But in all reality, a lot of hunters are just willing to shoot what's in front of them, opportunistic when it comes to cow hunting. And so that's kind of the reasoning behind it. We're not trying to drive, you know, the population lower than the objective. We're just curious to see if we can kind of lower that age, make the herd more productive, more healthy.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
I think it's kind of ironic that we have a lot of debate, and it's good debate about the book cliffs, but the recommendations 255 tags for a herd of 5,500 elk. I don't know what the percentage is there, but very low. Whereas on the South Slope Yellowstone, we were just having this discussion, there's approximately 3,000 tags on a herd of 7,400. And I understand they have the tribal land issue to hide on, but that herd stays stable with like a 40% of the population out in antlerless tags. So just kind of highlights the difference between the book cliffs where it struggles and up where maybe they have a little better better conditions. So that's just my 2 cents worth. Is there any motions that would deviate from the division's recommendations for antlerless cow elk? Okay, if not, I will take a motion for the packet as presented.
Yeah, this is Dan Abeta. I will make a motion that we accept the packet as it's been presented for antlerless elk.
This is Natasha. I'll second that.
Okay, Dan?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Daniel?
Yes.
Natasha?
Yes.
Conroy?
No.
Joe?
No.
Richie?
Yes.
Rebecca?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-2. Okay, next on the agenda will be once in a lifetime permit recommendations for 2021. Who from the division? Let's see.
Brett, we're going a little bit different order tonight. I want to make sure we don't miss anything. And you're right, we still need to address once in a lifetime. I don't feel like we had a vote on doe pronghorn recommendations. So that was with the rest of the antlerless. And I'm trying to understand that did the RAC intend to include the antlerless deer recommendations when we talked about deer? And if we did, then that's fine. But then we left
the antlerless. Antlerless antelope when we did deer. Is that where it was?
I thought, this is Dan. I thought that we covered the antlerless deer a couple agenda items back, because we talked about the chronic wasting. You know, there was like an extra 200 tags or something like that for the what is it, 9 Mile anthro with the mite and, you know, chronic CWD hotspot. I thought we talked about that.
Oh, okay, and if the RAC feels like that vote covered it, I just want to document it that's what that vote was. And we haven't addressed antlerless pronghorn permits, and we do need to address those.
Okay.
My understanding too.
Thank you, Covy, for bringing that up, because I definitely forgot the antlerless pronghorn. Where is that table in the packet? Is it in right with the deer?
Yeah, it's in the. It was with all the antlerless.
Okay.
Would it be more appropriate to at this point where we lump deer and elk in each motion item to maybe continue in that realm based on each species?
Yes, I think that would be probably, especially now that I've kind of got it in a problem that we should do that. We should just address the antelope separately. I'm trying to find the picture.
And we need to address, I'm sorry. So in this, the antlerless animals that we haven't addressed are antlerless moose, doe pronghorn, and ewe bighorn sheep. And so we need to make sure that we address all of those with antlerless.
Brett, that doe pronghorn is bookmarked as 5D, if that helps. Over on the left side of the agenda.
Okay.
5D.
It's also on page 24 of the packet.
Okay.
And I can give a a quick summary of the recommendations from our region. If you want, I don't have all the ones from the rest of the state on memory, but I can give you a rundown of our regional Pronghorn Recs if you want it.
Or I can just read it here. I finally found it. The book cliffs. This is limited entry pronghorn permits, which we didn't address any of the pronghorn. So limited entry pronghorn permits. There's an increase from 24 to 34 in the Book Cliffs Bitter Creek. Book Cliffs South is stable at 29. The 9 Mile Anthro Mighton Bench, there's an increase from 74 to 90. 9 Mile Range Creek, which is out of our unit, but it's stable at 12. North Slope Summit from an increase of 2 from 8 to 10. North Slope Three Corners West Daggett, an increase from 35 to 40. South Slope Bonanza Diamond Mountain, an increase from 51 to 60. South Slope Vernal, an increase also from 40 to 57. And that's the limited entry antelope. Is there any questions? Looks like there's pretty much an increase across the board. Is there any questions?
The South Slope Vernal unit and those that they're, Bonanza, that they're increasing them on, is that because of the drought, or is the herd objective is growing, or what's the reasoning for such a large increase?
So we manage our buck pronghorn based on average age of harvested bucks, and that's 2 to 3, so 2.5-year-old average age of harvested bucks, and all of our units are quite a bit above that. And then also we have really high documented buck to doe ratios. On a unit like the Vernal, the buck to doe ratio is higher than 1 to 1. So and that change where we managed to that age, that 2 to 3-year-old bucks, that's just changed in the last few years. That's a relatively new thing when we updated the pronghorn plan just a few years back. A lot of research and data showed that buck pronghorn have achieved basically maximum antler growth. They're about as big, or not antlers, I'm sorry. Their horn growth is about as big as it's going to be by the time they're 2 to 3 years old. They don't grow a whole lot more if they live much longer than that. And so that's why we changed that to allow for more opportunity for folks to harvest, and they can still have good trophy quality on buck pronghorn as well. So that's where the increases are coming from in our region, is that we're well above that age objective. We have high success rates, very high hunter satisfaction from our pronghorn hunts, and there's opportunity to give a few more tags based on those ages and really high buck to doe ratios.
Good, thank you. It seems like to me that the good years are going on right now with the antelope hunting around here, the trophy quality and success, and you sure hear a lot of positive about it.
Are there any other questions about limited entry antelope? Okay, since we have no side motions, doe pronghorn hunts. There's a new hunt on 9 Mile Anthro Pleasant Valley with 70 recommended tags. North Slope Summit, 5 tags. North Slope Three Corners, 5 tags. North Slope West Daggett, 4 tags. And I believe that's the recommended ones. Is the new hunt new tags, or is it just a new boundary? Is that 70 new hunt?
It's a new hunt, new tags. Pronghorn, it's kind of interesting. Things are looking pretty good for bucks. As far as mature bucks and like I mentioned, harvest success and hunter satisfaction. As far as overall pronghorn numbers, we have seen some little dips in fawn recruitment on some of these units because of the drought. but they're pretty adaptive. And so what we've had happen in a few areas like Pleasant Valley and Ouray Valley are a couple of them. We've had a ton of the pronghorn that have sucked into the irrigated alfalfa fields. And they're doing great. They're having twins, they're having triplets when they're eating irrigated alfalfa. But some of those landowners are getting a little tired of seeing, literally hundreds of pronghorn in their alfalfa fields. Last year, we called a couple of like emergency depredation doe pronghorn hunts and harvested some does in those areas. We also issued landowner vouchers, but we had a lot of landowners that were willing to let the public on to harvest some of those does so we can address kind of this shift in distribution of a lot of pronghorn showing up in irrigated fields and being really productive. And so rather than issuing as many landowner vouchers or calling those emergency depredation hunter pool doe pronghorn hunts, we're going to issue these public draw doe pronghorn permits. There seems to be quite a bit of demand to draw doe pronghorn hunts, and we've got a lot of landowners that are willing to let folks on. So that's a new hunt, new permits, but it's kind of replacing the permits that we issued through the depredation hunter pool last year or vouchers that we've been issuing to landowners. And we'll still issue some vouchers to landowners, and we're still kind of trying to navigate this and figure it out in Ouray Valley. But in Pleasant Valley, we're recommending this doe hunt this year, and we hope that this can work well to address kind of a overabundance of pronghorn in those irrigated fields.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions or any other questions or anything that would deviate from the recommendation for doe pronghorn? Okay, Covy's suggestion is a good one. Cow moose, while we're dealing with these, we'll just group them and do them in one motion. Antlerless moose hunt, there are none in the Northeast region that I can see. There's just the two in East Canyon, one in Morgan and one in Ogden. So if anyone has any questions or any concern with that, please speak up. And then there is one bighorn ewe hunt to harvest 10 animals on the Newfoundland mountains. Does anyone have any comments on that? Okay, if not, I would take a motion to approve the division's recommendation for buck antelope, antlerless antelope, pronghorn, excuse me, antlerless moose, and ewe bighorn.
Yep, this is Dan Abeta, and I will make a motion that we accept the division's proposal for those hunts that you just mentioned, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Commissioner Brad Horricks, and I would second that motion.
Okay, take a vote, roll call. Dan?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Daniel?
Yes.
Natasha?
Yes.
Conroy?
Yes.
Joe? I didn't hear you, Joe, or if you're still here. Richie?
Yes.
Rebecca?
Yes.
Joe, are you with us? Okay, I'll follow up with that on Joe. That motion passes, I believe, unanimous. Thank you, Covy, for keeping us in line.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We'll move on to once in a lifetime permit recommendations. Riley, would you just give us a very brief overview, kind of a summary, like your summary page?
I can. I thought Miles was going to do that.
that accurate, Miles?
No, I can give the the public input or the comments from the public, which we received no comments or any feedback at all on once in a lifetime. So no responses from our region on that. In terms of the permit numbers and those kinds of changes, I don't have those right in front of me.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. I thought you were asking about the public comment and information that way. Were you asking about the permit summaries?
Yeah, just a brief summary of your recommendation, just kind of like you have on your memorandum.
All right. Yeah, I mean, in summary, maybe we can all once in a lifetime. I'll start with bison. Bison on the book cliffs. There's not a large change in that. They're generally speaking, we're leaving bison on the book cliffs very similar to what it was in 2020. Maybe a couple exceptions to that would be the Little Creek roadless area and the Bitter Creek South hunt. On bison on the Henry Mountains, to address drought, range conditions, and some of the factors that are surrounded by that, there is a pretty aggressive increase in bison on the Henrys. And in looking at bighorn sheep, for desert bighorn, we're recommending an increase of 3 permits overall on desert bighorn. For Rocky Mountain bighorn, we're recommending an increase of 3 permits overall. On mountain goat, we're recommending a decrease of 2 permits overall. So, and then I think that leaves me with moose, and that may be the only one I left off. Did I leave that off? I did. With moose, we're recommending an increase of 5 permits overall. So I don't know if there's questions on the specific units or specific animals, but that's just a brief overview on the recommendations.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any questions from the RAC? Okay, I hear none. If everyone's good with the recommendations, I would entertain a motion.
Jeff Taniguchi, I would like to recommend that we accept the Divisional Wildlife's recommendation on once in a lifetime animals.
Thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that. This is Natasha. I'll second that.
Okay. Dan? Roll call.
Yes, sorry, Brett. Yeah, it took me a minute to get the mute off. Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Daniel?
Yes.
Natasha?
Yes.
Conroy?
Yes.
Joe? Richie?
Yes.
Rebecca?
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes. Thank you. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda. I can find my agenda. Which would be CWMU permits. Chad Wilson. Chad, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here. You just wanting to review like Riley gave?
Yeah, just a brief summary. Be great.
So yeah, I mean, overall, this is one where the public gets a lot of tags. So where there's 42 renewal applications, 2 change applications, and 3 new applications, total of 66 CWMUs with antlerless permits, 160 private permits, and 1,105 public permits. I could break it down by species, how many private and public if you'd like.
No, I think we're pretty familiar with it. Does anyone have any specific questions related to the CWMU recommendations?
I'll jump in real quick with the public feedback. Not many comments. 50% strongly agreed, and 50% neither agreed or disagreed. There's really one comment, and that comment was supporting more cow tags on CWMU in an effort to help distribute elk from CWMUs onto some of the adjacent public lands. In some cases, I think the comment indicated that the elk that can stack up on CWMUs and not be available to public on public lands. So their support was to get more tags to help distribute elk further out on the landscape.
And I believe that same comment was bringing up that they would not hunt CWMUs during the general hunts on the surrounding land, Chad, as a way to give the animals refuge from the public hunters. There was some comments that alluded to that.
Kind of tailed off there at the end, but I think I understand the question. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's just concern. We have the private lands only tags that we give to make it so there's pressure on the elk on private lands. And so the concept is saying that the CWMUs, that potentially we need to do that same thing. They have tags. So sometimes I don't know if it's only just wanting more tags, but maybe targeting of when they hunt. So the concept was more designing having the CWMUs hunt their antlerless elk at the same time that we have antlerless elk seasons. So when we have our general season, that it doesn't just push them onto CWMUs and give them a safe haven, and that we can have higher success both on the CWMU and off the CWMU.
Okay, thank you. So does anybody on the RAC have any questions or any input on the CWMU recommendations? Okay, if not, I would entertain a motion on that subject.
I'll make a motion. This is Natasha. To accept the CWMU antlerless permit recommendations as presented by the Division of Wildlife.
Jeff Taniguchi, second.
Thank you. Dan?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Daniel?
Yes.
Natasha?
Yes.
Conroy?
No.
Joe?
Yes.
Richie?
Yes.
Rebecca?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Which will move us to the last item on our agenda, the conservation permit rule amendments. Justin, would you just briefly summarize this? Is Justin still with us?
Sorry, I was on mute there, Brett. Apologize.
Okay, we hear you better now.
Yeah. I'll summarize this briefly. What we're doing is recommending updates to the conservation permit rule. And in a nutshell, it's to simplify, strengthen, and clarify portions of the rule. And so that's what we're doing tonight.
Thank you. It looks like it's fairly complex with the drafts and the bid and the trades and all that. Huh?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you look at it, a lot of what we were doing was cutting portions of the rule. And there's changes obviously throughout, but if this passes, the rule will be much more simple and shorter. So, yeah. Miles, did you have a summary?
Yes. So basically, the public feedback was that 20% strongly agreed, 20% somewhat agreed, and then 60% of the people neither agreed nor disagreed. And we didn't have any specific comments submitted on this topic.
Does the RAC have any questions or comments?
I've got a couple questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, please go ahead.
So on the profit share, could you provide us a little more clarification on the profit share portion of that and how that pertains to new organizations getting in?
Yeah, let me make sure I understand your question. Is your question what is market share, or is it if there's a new organization that joins, how do they get market share?
Yes, that's correct. I'm sorry. Market, not profit.
Wait, let's see. I'll start with the latter then. So if a new organization joins the conservation permit program, they'd get 0.5% market share, which is higher than what it was previously with a one-year group starting. And so what we wanted to do was start new groups off on the right foot, get them integrated in to the 3-year program, have them have tags available that they can market during that 3-year time frame, and raise some money for wildlife and conservation. Does that help?
It does. And so can these conservation organizations supplement more than that 0.5% if they chose?
Sorry, I don't understand the question. What do you mean by supplement the 0.5%?
So that 0.5%, if I understand correctly, goes towards the bidding process for conservation permits. Are they capped at that value, or can they add additional funds to that to try to, if you will, bid for additional permits?
Yeah, so for the first 3 years, it would be set at 0.5% for any group that joins. But then based on how the conservation organization performs during that 3-year period, so for instance, if they double their market share or they sell those permits over the next 3 years for quite a bit more than what it was the previous 3 years, and they're able to increase their market share, then yes, the next time we do a 3-year cycle, they would have more money to bid on permits and get more permits for their conservation organization.
Now, and that's on growth, correct? So what happens in an instance where some units happen to decrease and some of their conservation permits don't hold a public perceived value that grows, and they're unable to attain that growth? Is that a penalty towards the organizations?
Yeah, that's why it's so important to draft wisely. So when a conservation organization is looking to spend their market share on and trying to obtain the right permits, they'll have to choose wisely on what they think members of their organization would be willing to bid on. And so we constantly have permits or units that improve or decrease over the life of the 3-year span, and so there's no certainty with it, and so but again, the groups are able to select their permits up front. And so the more research a group does, the better off they'll be.
One more quick question of clarification. I glanced over the rule. These conservation permits are auction only, correct? These organizations couldn't do a raffle of sorts or any other additional fundraising attempts to generate funds. Is that correct?
Yeah, so what it needs to be is an online or in-person auction with the assistance of a live auctioneer that are well advertised. And so that's, as part of the rule, that's the way that they should be auctioned.
I just want to say thanks to Justin. I wanted to get kind of some of that information out there. I've been asked a lot of questions about how that process works directly in line with the questions that I asked. So I appreciate you answering those for me tonight.
No problem. Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you. Any other questions from the RAC? Okay, if not, I would entertain a motion on this topic to accept it as presented. Sorry, I've had to relocate. I've had some Wi-Fi problems, so that's why I'm running around my house carrying my computer. You guys, you just quit talking. You're just right there on the screen and you're not saying anything. And then I realize it's not you, it's me. So
I'll make the motion, Mr. Chair, to accept the amendments as presented.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Dan?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Daniel?
Yes.
Natasha?
Yes.
Conroy?
I will abstain from this.
Joe?
Yes.
Richie?
Yes.
And Rebecca?
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for bearing with me. I've had some technical issues the whole meeting. Is there any other topics anyone wants to discuss tonight?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Dan again. I've got a question. I kind of missed my opportunity. I lost connection here earlier in the meeting, but I wanted to ask the question to the Division of Wildlife about the safety, human consumption of deer that have chronic wasting disease. What's the latest on that? Because I hear it's safe to eat deer that are infected with chronic wasting disease, but I hear there's also some information out there that suggests that maybe it's not so safe. And I'm thinking in terms of that South Slope Mighton 200 doe deer permit. Can somebody address that question?
I can take that one if you'd like. First of all, I'm not a veterinarian and I'm not a medical professional. I'm a biologist, right? So I'm going to address it as a biologist and the understanding that I have, which is pretty limited. What I would say is we'll test the animal. And so I wouldn't recommend that anybody ate meat from a deer that has chronic wasting disease. I know that they've done studies, and you can find studies on you can research that out on your own and make your decision up for yourself. And I would say we're willing to test the animal, and we're willing to come and get and dispose of the meat. I wouldn't recommend that anybody ate the meat of a positive animal. So, is there anything that Justin, is there anything I missed or anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I would just say we would err on the side of caution, and we would recommend against it.
So the point is the public protected to discard that meat through a dumpster, a dump station, or what have you, without the potential of waste of wildlife, or how does that process work?
Call us, Daniel. Call us, we'll come get it.
We have said we on that Mighton hunt, we send out a letter to each of those permittees explaining where they can, identifying where they can get that meat tested, that animal tested. And so that they have the opportunity to get every animal tested. We encourage them strongly to bring it into us so we can get it tested and make sure if they do have an animal that tests positive, Daniel, we have somebody who literally calls them and will go meet them and pick up the meat even from them and take it. So we make sure it gets destroyed not just dumped in a dumpster or dumped up on the mountain. We make sure it goes to the right place, and then they have an opportunity. If there's a positive animal, we give them a permit for the next year, so that they don't lose that opportunity to gain, the meat and that kind of thing too. So.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of where I was going, Randall. Thank you.
Richie, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I just had just a quick comment on the book list. I think there's a lot of effort, and it's a good effort. It's a combined effort between a lot of agencies and individuals. I think that book list is a sensitive area and it's touchy right now, but I think the management adjustments that's been made out there, a lot of the efforts that's made out there, I think we're going to see results. I think we get some moisture. I think things are headed the right direction in the book list. With some added moisture, I think we're going to see some big changes. And my comment on the roadless area wasn't meant to mean that DWR hasn't done any habitat in there. It just meant I think we've got additional opportunity maybe on some of those ridges to help out. But I really like a lot of the direction that the things are going in the book list. Thank you.
Thanks, Richie.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Would it be possible to ask that on those book cliff updates that are going to be provided throughout the next few upcoming RACs, if it would be possible to identify some of those funded projects from the conservation organizations that are helping out and kind of what that value accounts for? We talked about it. We've all committed to help. We've had the meetings here recently where the money has been dedicated to some of those specific improvements. Could those be included as well in those updates?
Yeah, we could do that, Daniel. We've got some spreadsheets that we can total the amount of contributions from various partners. We can do it specifically on the book list, so that's totally possible.
Thank you, Miles.
Thanks, Miles. Do you have anything else you want to add this evening, Miles?
I don't, nothing really specific, but Brad made a comment that maybe we need to toot our horn more, and I think this Book Cliffs working group has been a lot of success, a lot of progress made, and we definitely need to toot the horn of the collective group of the things that have been accomplished out there. And we provide some updates here and there, but it's time to update the RAC, and hopefully the public that are watching it can see the magnitude of efforts that have been made out there, and it's something I think there's good commitment and from the partners to continue to move forward with that, into the future. So it's an important area for a lot of people, a lot of the sportsmen in the state, and so it's a place we're taking pretty seriously.
Thank you. Have we addressed all the issues on your list, Miles? When I got out of order, do you think we got it all captured?
Yeah, as I look at it, I think we did. Unless anybody else sees a place that we missed, but I think everything's been covered.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Who was that made that motion? Daniel?
Daniel.
Thank you. Any seconds?
Yeah, Dan seconds that.
Okay, roll call, then we'll adjourn. Dan?
Yes, sir.
Jeff?
Yes.
Brad? Mike?
Yes.
Daniel?
Yes.
Natasha?
Yes.
Conroy?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Richie?
Yes.
Rebecca?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate all your input. We'll see you next time. This meeting is now adjourned.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Brett. Good job.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Adios.